All right, let's dive right in. Today, we are unpacking a highly specific, highly consequential, and honestly incredibly important legal document. It's officially known as the Third Schedule, operating under Sections 89 and 90, and it serves as the definitive list of notifiable diseases. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Reading a legal schedule of occupational hazards sounds like, well, a pretty dry exercise. But stick with me here, because this text is actually a fascinating, if maybe a little grim, roadmap of the very real, often invisible hazards that workers face across all sorts of industries every single day. We're going to decode this list, bring these medical terms to life, and see exactly what it all means for workplace safety.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, what exactly are notifiable diseases? Then we'll explore toxic chemicals and metals, move into the respiratory invaders, examine skin, radiation, and biology, and finally, wrap up with why this schedule actually matters today.
Okay, part 1. What are notifiable diseases?
So the absolutely crucial point here is that we're not talking about your average seasonal cold or, some random flu bug you catch at the grocery store. These are specific, meticulously cataloged diseases tied directly to the job a worker does every single day. By law, under Sections 89 and 90, if a worker develops one of these 29 listed conditions, it is notifiable, meaning it absolutely must be officially reported. It's essentially a legal tripwire designed to alert authorities that a workplace is actively harming its employees.
Now, nobody wants to sit here and just read 29 complex medical terms word for word, right? So we've sorted this massive schedule into 3 distinct battlegrounds. You've got chemical threats like lead and benzene, respiratory invaders that attack the lungs like silicosis and asbestosis, and finally, physical and biological perils, think anthrax and x-rays. This structure is really going to help us see exactly what workers are up against.
Moving right into part 2, toxic chemicals and metals.
Right at the very beginning, the schedule heavily features heavy metals and toxic chemicals, which really highlights the severe risks for workers handling these base elements. Entries 1 through 6 read like a toxicologist's absolute nightmare. We have lead poisoning in entry 1, specifically lead tetraethyl in entry 2, and then we move right into phosphorus, mercury, manganese, and arsenic poisoning. And what's super interesting is that for almost all of these, you'll see the phrase, or its sequelae. Sequelae is just a fancy medical term for a condition that's the consequence of a previous disease or injury. Basically, the law is ensuring that it's not just the immediate poisoning that's covered, but all the lasting, chronic aftershocks of working with these heavy metals are legally recognized too.
Now, look closely at how incredibly thorough the law is regarding highly volatile chemicals like benzene. It doesn't just cover basic benzene poisoning. No, it explicitly includes poisoning by any of its homologs, which means compounds belonging to the exact same chemical family. It covers their nitro or amido derivatives, and again, its sequelae, those lingering after effects. This precise legal language is brilliant because it closes any loopholes. If a factory slightly alters the chemical makeup of a benzene-based solvent, well, the resulting occupational diseases are still absolutely covered and notifiable under the Third Schedule.
So we've covered the toxic substances workers handle physically. But what happens when the threat is literally in the air you're breathing? You can usually see a chemical spill, but you can't always see what's suspended in the very air of a workplace.
Which brings us to part 3, the respiratory invaders.
These entries represent basically a most wanted list of dust-related diseases that slowly destroy lung tissue. Let's break them down. Entry 12 is silicosis, caused by inhaling silica dust. Entry 20 is bisonosis, which is famously tied to inhaling cotton or textile dust. Entry 21 is the one we all know, asbestosis, from asbestos fibers. And then we have entry 26, coal miners' pneumoconiosis. The scary thing here is these aren't sudden poisonings. These are insidious, creeping conditions that develop over years and years of a worker simply breathing the air in their factory or textile mill or coal mine.
To use a pretty vivid example straight from the text, just imagine the stark difference between breathing clear air and the suffocating reality of a worker developing entry 26, coal miners' pneumoconiosis. This is literally the physical accumulation of coal dust deep in the lungs, leading to a massive tissue reaction. And it's not just dust either. The schedule also lists other respiratory threats like poisoning by nitrous fumes in entry 7, phosgene poisoning in entry 27, and carbon monoxide in entry 24. Whether it's physical dust or poisonous gas, the law meticulously catalogs all these airborne invaders.
All right, on to part 4, skin, radiation, and biology.
This diverse bucket is fascinating because it shows just how incredibly varied occupational hazards can actually be. On the biological side, entry 11 lists anthrax,
a really serious infectious disease that workers handling contaminated animal products might face. Then, look over at the radiation column. Entry 14 covers pathological manifestations due to radium, other radioactive substances, and X-rays. Think about the medical professionals or industrial radiographers constantly exposed to these invisible forces. And finally, we have severe skin conditions. Chrome ulceration in Entry 10, and oil acne or dermatitis due to mineral oils in Entry 19. The schedule recognizes that the skin is the body's largest organ, making it a major point of vulnerability on the job.
I actually want to zoom in on entry number 22 for a second, because it represents one of the absolute most common physical hazards faced across everyday industries.
Entry 22 brilliantly illustrates how the schedule gets highly scientific to make sure workers are protected. It lists occupational or contact dermatitis caused by direct contact with chemicals and paints, but it goes a step further, explicitly stating that these come in two types: primary irritants and allergic sensitizers. A primary irritant physically damages the skin right at the site of contact, whereas an allergic sensitizer triggers an immune response after repeated exposure. By defining both types, the law ensures that whether a worker gets a sudden chemical burn today or develops a really severe paint allergy after 10 years on the job, it doesn't matter. It is equally recognized and legally notifiable.
And right next door to that is Entry 23, which is a perfect, concrete example of an everyday hazard that doesn't involve toxic chemicals or biological spores, but is honestly just as damaging.
Entry 23 is noise-induced hearing loss due to exposure to high noise levels. Think of the intense, continuous roar of heavy machinery on a factory floor, or the deafening sounds of a construction site or an active airport tarmac. This kind of hazard slowly, almost imperceptibly, robs workers of their hearing over time. The fact that this is included in the third schedule proves that notifiable diseases aren't just about what you accidentally ingest or breathe in. They are about the total physical toll the working environment takes on the human body. Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, Why This Schedule Matters.
A quick look at the legal journey of this text really provides the answer here. A footnote in our source reveals that this schedule was renumbered as the third schedule by Act 20 of 1987, coming into effect on December 1st of that year. And ever since then, it has served a continuous, absolutely vital purpose under Sections 89 and 90. By forcing these specific diseases to be legally reported, it creates a paper trail, data. Because let's face it, you cannot fix a hazard you cannot see. This schedule forces the invisible, hidden threats of the workplace out into the open, giving us the necessary data to regulate, improve conditions, and ultimately eliminate these specific hazards in the future.
And I think that is the true power of the third schedule. Naming and notifying is the absolutely crucial first step in preventing occupational suffering. It's important to remember that behind every dense, intimidating medical term on this list, whether it's toxic anemia in Entry 16, toxic jaundice in Entry 18, or primary epitheliomatous cancer of the skin in Entry 15, there is a real person, a worker who is simply trying to do their job, earn a living, and was harmed by their environment. This list exists to hold those environments accountable.
So I'll leave you with this thought to reflect on. Whether you sit in a cozy office, work on a factory floor, or manage a busy job site, understanding these hazards really changes how you view workplace environments. Which of these categories, the chemicals, the respiratory dust, or the physical elements, might be secretly lurking where you work? Are you absolutely sure you're properly protected? I hope this explainer has decoded the third schedule for you and given you a newfound respect for workplace safety. Keep learning, keep questioning, and definitely stay safe out there.